Hey Karu, this is my soak from this morning. I cut it down so it's just the soak part of the video. And I figured I would talk to you briefly about a debate that I watched yesterday. And, it was actually more of a discussion. It was the type of debate that I like, because it's two people who disagree having a reasonable discussion rather than trying to win. And it was about transhumanism. And I was not particularly familiar with transhumanism. And the woman who was arguing in favor of transhumanism was a young professor at Oxford, Australian woman, or at least she got her PhD in Australia, who was talking about how, we have this inevitable future where transhumanism is the next step of intelligent life forms that will exist and will be some sort of amalgam of humans and computers that will replace humans evolutionarily, essentially. And the woman arguing against is a older woman, probably in her 50s, who I have read some of her other stuff and seen her before. And she calls herself a radical feminist, I think. And she actually was as a younger woman, was a professional, very extreme left, and then in her 40s had children, and it transformed her view a little bit, and she became more, probably more conservative in her feminism, in that she doesn't agree with a lot of she feels like a lot of the left is doesn't appreciate the human condition and having children and how that changes you, and kind of the slightly more conservative positions that having children and having to care for children bring out in people. And anyway, it was really interesting because the woman arguing for humanism, or for transhumanism, I found her argument somewhat incoherent. She never defined transhumanism in a way that made it easy to understand what she was talking about. She made some weird argument about how this was sort of natural evolution, and she said, you wouldn't have stopped evolution at single-celled organisms or before you had hominids. You wouldn't have just arbitrarily said, we should stop evolution, and that an argument against transhumanism where we engineer through genetic engineering and computer science sort of these superior beings that she thinks will eventually replace us, and she argues that we are no longer suited for the evolutionary niche that we evolved into, and therefore we need to be replaced, and it's going to happen eventually. And the kind of alternatives are extinction or a new, greater, higher intelligent life form. She also argued that basically, she said like 100,000 people a day die of age-related complications, and we should be working to end that. And so basically she's arguing for the end of death, and she says, I don't know anyone who thinks they lived long enough. Of course, she's a 30-year-old or around that woman without family and kids. and that changes your perspective. But anyway, it was just really interesting to listen to these perspectives. The woman arguing against transhumanism actually said that we're already living in a transhumanist world, because by her definition of transhumanism, where we're basically using engineering to extend and control our biological forms. And she talked about the introduction of the pill, and how that basically is a transhumanist. Anybody who's on the pill is a transhumanist. Is a transhuman, because they are controlling their physical being, not for medical purposes, but for to try to make their lives what they perceive as better. And then she went on to argue that the introduction of the pill has been bad for women, because it's commodified women's bodies in a way that was not possible before, when sexual reproduction couldn't be controlled, and that the overall impact is we've just made a hash of it. And basically what's happened is rich people have been able to control their bodies in a way that poor people haven't, and women in particular. The introduction of the pill has not been, on the whole, a good thing for women. It's created this thing where women now are seen as workers. They're not given time to have children. They there's just her argument basically is like, this has been a disaster, and that the idea that we should just embrace this transhumanist philosophy would result in rich people getting more of what they want, and poor people having to sell their organs to rich people in order to get by, and she said, she said that she wasn't convinced of that particular scenario, but that was one, and that based on the way that we dealt with birth control as sort of a transhumanist phenomena, that she didn't have faith, and that maybe we should pump the brakes a little bit on this and try to get better at being humans before we look at moving on through technology and engineering. The other thing that happened was, I think one of the reasons the transhumanist woman's argument seemed so mushy is she was trying to moderate them, because she knew she was not in a particularly receptive audience. But the woman arguing it against had read her book and said, you make a lot of really spicy takes in your book. For instance, you call humans ape-brained meat sacks. And the idea that humans are just ape-brained meat sacks is reductionist and not very human, actually. And the interesting thing I found was they never really defined what it means to be human. They didn't define... actually, the woman arguing against transhumanism is the only one who offered a definition. And then they started talking about, spiritual existence and the soul. And not surprisingly, the woman arguing for transhumanism is an avowed atheist. But, they never defined any of their terms, so it was frustrating. Anyway, it was interesting to think about, and I'm going to do some more reading on it when I get some time. But I thought I'd just talk about that while you watched me soak. That's my story. I'm sticking to it. Morning, crew. That was, I think it was 9 minutes or so. Check the video. But, yeah, great morning here. You can see how beautiful it is. Definitely a good soak.